My name is Ubaldo Hernández, and I want you to thank you for being here with us. We are at um, Environmental Advocacy Perspectivas de la Comunidad Latina. This is going to be a conversation in which we're going to talk about our experiences as a part of the Latino community, Latinas, Latinos, participating and advocating for the environment in our communities. We have a panel of three really smart and really strong women that they are constantly, day by day, protecting our communities. We have Ana Molina from Beyond Toxics. We have Dominica Navarro from Northwest Alternative to Pesticides. And we have Lisa Muñoz. She is from Comunidades, Amplifying Voices for Environmental and Social Justice. And before we start the conversation, I would like for Ana, for our panelists to introduce themselves. We're going to start with Ana Molina. Ana Molina.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ana Molina, she, her pronouns. I work with Beyond Toxics as their statewide environmental justice projects manager. Our office is located in Eugene, Oregon. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Muñoz. I'm the program director at Comunidades. We're located in Hood River, but we serve Skamania, Wasco, Hood River, and Klickitat County. Dominica?
Good evening. My name is Dominica Navarro, and I work with the Northwest Center for Alternatives to Pesticides as the Healthy People and Communities Program Manager. And I am located in Central Oregon. However, we do work across the Northwest region. So Oregon, Washington, and Idaho.
Well, like you see, this is going to be a really interesting conversation. We have a great panel. And so we're going to learn about our communities. And on this time specifically, more about pesticides and how our Ana Molina and Dominica and Lisa, they want to advocate in order to protect our communities from the harm of pesticides they create in our communities. And at the same time, we're going to talk about our experiences participating in organizations that protect our natural resources, and so to see how we can invite our listeners or people who participate to participate with us and protect our natural resources as well as the health of our communities. And this question is for all of you. And can you tell us about the life experience? What motivates you to work in this environmental advocacy work? Like Ana Molina, what motivates you to work in Beyond Toxics?
Thank you. A life experience, it definitely is very personal for me, how I came to this work. How it started for me was finally able to work for the Forest Service when I was in community college. It was something that I had wanted to do for a really long time. As somebody who has deferred action and couldn't work for like the government during these like opportunities in high school and then college, and then I finally got my work permit, and so I was able to work with the Forest Service, and so that really fostered my environmental stewardship and my connection to land. But then when I went to college and learned about environmental justice and environment and how my classes didn't really cover the social aspect. They were very science-based. And I was like, but people are still connected to land, like the way that racism has impacted where people live and what they're exposed to, like wasn't talked about in my classes. It was very solely just conservation focused. And so I felt that this really big disconnect, that it wasn't speaking to me. And so it was talking with my classmates and doing work outside of my classroom, more like social justice work, like starting an undocumented student center on campus with other students and all of this, that I saw this really big intersection, and I didn't want to stay in school anymore because I didn't want to like switch majors. And so I really was interested in pursuing environmental justice as work. And so that's how I ended up at Beyond Toxics. That has really allowed me to dive into this environmental justice work and who are the communities that are impacted, that are primarily Black, Indigenous, Latino, tribal communities, people of color who are most impacted by the environments that we live in.
Thank you. Lisa, what motivates you to work for Comunidades, especially with your education background as a scientist?
Yeah, I grew up in an agricultural setting because my parents were both agricultural workers, and all of our free time outside of that was also in nature. I spent a lot of time with my family hunting, fishing, gardening, and that really cultivated this like deep love and respect for our environment. And I wanted to be a person that protected it for our future generations. I don't think that I quite knew how to do that when I was in college, because I had a very similar experience as Anna, in the sense that I feel like science has always been a tool that supports environmental causes, but it really is distance from social justice. And for me, I feel like knowing how to utilize these tools that are, it's really vital for our communities to make change. So I think of myself a lot of the times as this bridge between information and the people that are lacking that information. Science is sort of a very exclusive system that's created for the people that are in the scientific field. So it doesn't always reach the people that are most affected by the results of that research. So that's sort of why I ended up in Comunidades, and I felt it was really important because it was a culmination of my personal experience in the orchard and all of my scientific background.
Thank you. Dominica, what motivates you to work for Beyond Toxics?
Thank you. NCAP, Northwest Center for
NCAP.
Alternatives to Pesticides. You know, it's really been a lifelong journey, and I think that I could pinpoint it to the day that I was really moved. And it was in 1994, and I was about 7 years old, and the United Farm Workers Union was boycotting California grapes, and I was born and raised in Michigan. And they were boycotting these grapes over harsh working conditions and the use of dangerous pesticides. And my father took me to a demonstration that was happening at the Michigan State University campus, where the students were holding a hunger strike using Cesar Chavez's, nonviolent protest techniques to really try and get their university to stop buying these grapes. And I think that was really just a moment for me that just really highlighted the power of just social movements and just the power of people. But not only that, but the power of food, right? And the power that food has when we decide not to consume food to make a point, but also the power that food has amongst our community, and that, our community is made up of the trabajadores that these individuals are really advocating for. And so, as I grew up, I really, drew upon that moment to pursue, lifelong, just kind of advocacy and social justice work. And so, looking at food, I continued my journey in life. I was vegan for 9 years, which I'm no longer, but was a great experience for me to really connect very deeply with my food, but very deeply where my food comes from. And so when I went to college, I studied community studies along with environmental studies, because I also had a very similar experience of being in the environmental studies classrooms and feeling like the only person of color, one of the very few people of color in the classroom, and not really feeling like there was a connection to the communities that like Anna and Lisa were saying, are affecting. And so I turned, my education into something that I had control over, and I added another major and decided to add a community component to that. And really understanding the power of food within our communities has just been something that I'm very passionate about. And so working with the Northwest Center for Alternatives to Pesticides is allowing me to really work with people on a community level to find the solutions, right, to chemical pesticides in our food system.
Thank you. Well, this is a really good starting conversation. It kind of portrays the diversity in our Latino community, right? On a Latino community, we came from different backgrounds, and we decide to participate in protecting our natural resources because that's part of our culture, right? Even if we are from a different backgrounds, different experiences, so we are willing to step forward and participate in organizations that protect our natural resources. Before we continue with our conversation, I just want to acknowledge that tonight's webinar is funded in part from a grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We appreciate the support, but we need to mention the views that are shared tonight here are our own and no from the EPA's opinions. So just we know that it's our opinions and it's our experience, it's our perspective from the La Comunidad Latina in environmental advocacy. And I want to ask Anna and Dominica, so you both have invested a lot of time and energy protecting our communities from pollution, and all that these pesticides harm they create in our communities, how these pesticides affect the health of our farm workers, people that grow the food, pick the food, and distribute the food, the food that we eat all over the country. Can you give an example or two how you work on pesticides aims to prevent pollution, knowing that you guys have different approach for these issues. Anna, can you start?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely, Beyond Toxics works more on a legislative approach. We work a lot more through like rulemaking and at the legislature trying to pass laws and regulations that protect people and their health. And so we work to reduce pesticide use and drift in public spaces such as schools, government buildings, and public roadways. We're working again to protect not only the health of ourselves, but of our children and the communities that we work with. And so some examples that of like the work that we've done in order to reduce the use of pesticides has been the work that we've done with Bikun on restricting the use of chlorpyrifos in Oregon. This was a campaign that we started back in 2019 and it continued into 2020. And so it started off in 2019 as a bill to ban chlorpyrifos, the use of chlorpyrifos. And chlorpyrifos is a really toxic chemical that's been linked to birth defects and in farm workers. There's no safe level of exposure to chlorpyrifos. So any level is still harmful. And so this was a campaign that we worked on in 2019. It didn't pass, but moved into the 2020 session. And then from there, it turned into a work group that was formed by the Department of Agriculture, where along with other health advocates, we were demanding for stronger health protections in the use of restricting chlorpyrifos. And so we were able to prohibit the use on golf courses, phase out the aerial application on all crops by January 1st, 2021, phase out aerial spraying on Christmas trees by December 31st, 2023. And there's still some spraying permitted on April 1st through June 15th, but there is it is a restricted amount of chlorpyrifos that can be used. And so that's just one of the examples that we really we'll get a lot of, we get a lot of phone calls and stories from different communities across the state of the pesticide exposure that they're, pesticide pollution that they're being exposed to. And so we work with them of like, what is the best of what is they want to do. And so that's kind of where this ban for chlorpyrifos came from. And so we work at it more at a state level to really regulate these pesticides that are harmful to communities.
Wow, that's a really important work. And I've been involved in some of the work beyond toxics, joining PECUN to ban chlorpyrifos. And that's a really important work that Beyond Toxics is doing in our communities in order to uh, lobbying for laws that ban the use of these harmful pesticides in our communities. But I want to ask Dominica, since she works for Northwest Alternatives to Pesticides, and I want to apologize for getting that wrong at the beginning, but I was nervous. I was like, starting, and I got a little bit nervous. But I would like to see what is the approach that you guys have in order to promote our communities to step away from pesticides. How you do that?
Thank you, Ubaldo. And no problem. I just want to say I respect Beyond Toxic so much, and just so the work that they do is so important. So however people can support Beyond Toxic's work, I just want to say, you know, at the policy level, the state level, you know, that is so important. That's how systems level change happens. So I'd also like to say that, you know, NCAP does have a little bit of a different approach. NCAP works a lot on education and resources for our community. And so we produce not only like tech resources, but we also do technical workshops. And so we want to help people utilize these resources to be able to implement, right, these alternatives to pesticides. And so this last year, we were able to put on a 3-part rain garden workshop series that was in Spanish and really focused for our Comunidad Latina and for landscaping professionals who are working individuals and who really serve our community in a very important way. And so by providing educational opportunities to be able to reduce pesticide use within working places and on people's homes and properties, really that technical assistance is something that's needed, and especially in Spanish, right, for folks who may not otherwise have access to educational opportunities that are in English, and not only in English, but are sometimes just the traditional educational model that our community might not be interested in or used to, right? I think that the way that we converse and the way that we learn may be a little bit different, and that's really something that I have been, along with, you know, working at NCAP and working on, is really creating that space for dialogue and learning, right, within our community. And so we do have a lot of resources on our website. A lot of it has to do with like these pesticides that are hard to pronounce and chemicals that are extremely toxic, but also other resources on, you know, how to implement a rain garden at home, or how to, you know, maybe handle weed problems that you have in your garden without spraying, other issues like bed bugs in the home. And so, you know, pesticides aren't only used in agriculture. A lot of the times they're used in homes and landscaping and things like that. So just recognizing that there's a lot of ways that pesticides are put into our environment. And so, you know, a diversity of approaches on how to really solve those problems. And I'd just like to say that, you know, a lot of those resources on our website are available in both English and Spanish.
Thank you, Dominica. And I want to share with the people that are watching us right now. I took that class. That was really interesting. Know how to build a rain garden, which I never thought about it, but I know now the importance of doing this. And also learning that a lot of the pesticides that reach our rivers, our communities, we are producing those from home. So it's really important for us to acknowledge that and be really cautious when we go to to the store and try to buy pesticides or chemicals to eradicate some type of pest that we are dealing with. Um, I encourage people to visit pesticides.org, right? And that's the organization where Dominica works, Norway's Alternative to Pesticides. And they have recommendations on how you can get rid of those bugs without harming your health, your community, and other living creatures that exist among us. Um, this question is for Lisa. Lisa, you are a chemical engineer, or and so you are a scientific woman. What you what takes you, or what in? Let me see. I kind of uh, need to figure out how to do this. Figure out this question. How you ended up working in Comunidades, and how you see the pesticides kind of had an influence for you to work at Comunidades and join this environmental advocacy uh, uh, jobs.
Yeah, I was on a very different track. I did a lot of research in college, and I definitely thought that that was going to be my future, was staying in a lab and doing research. But I feel like I was so connected to my community here in Hood River that there was always something drawing me back home. Because I felt like this community that had really raised me and given me all of my values was unaware, or was sort of had all of these obstacles preventing them from fully engaging in their community and advocating for themselves. And so in any way that I could assist them and really increasing their power, I was going to do. And so I feel like when I came back and realized this whole world of social justice, it really was due to like my community. And there are a lot of things that you learn in a scientific field besides just technical chemical names and the way they affect the body. That's really useful and valuable knowledge for sure. And I think that I will continue to use it with my engagement with people. But you also learn a lot about how structures can be altered and changed. And they're not like, systems are just there to work for you. They're not set in stone. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want people to recognize. That systems, if they're not working for you, then they're not useful. And there are ways to get around the obstacles that are preventing you from fully engaging with your community. And I think that's why I was so drawn to Comunidades, because our method of trying to assist in change is empowering people and reminding them that civic engagement is a tool that they can use in whatever form they feel comfortable. And really showing them that there's multiple pathways to change, whether it's engaging with Beyond Toxics in statewide campaigns, or going and learning about a rain garden with NCAP. All of these little changes in whatever way you feel comfortable engaging in it is useful and will ultimately help you with your own health. And there's people there to help you, like scientists like me, if there's questions that you have. So that's really why I took such a big shift in my career from I'm going to be in a lab to I want to engage with my community, because that's where my heart is.
Thank you, Lisa. And to be honest, when we were looking for somebody for Comunidades, that's where we picked Lisa, because that's from the perspective of a scientist, to come and support all the work we're doing. It's really important. And that's how you build your strength among your community, right? To get people that are knowledgeable in specific areas that can help you. And and join these voices and make these voices stronger so we can advocate better for our communities. And that's why we have these three great women participating with us tonight, but also participating every day, every night in their communities to help us communities protect from against the effects of harmful pesticides. Um, so this question is for all, because I want to know one of the things that we always talk in our conversations about, that we want to see more of the Latino community participating and advocating to protect our natural resources. And we want to do that. But also we have another perspective on how these environmental crises affect our communities and turn into social injustices. So I want to know your perspective, how you see that happen, and how we can encourage our communities to acknowledge that and to understand that we need to participate, uh, attacking both of those issues at the same time. I would like to start with Lisa.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the times we use very different language to discuss social justice issues and environmental issues. So it can be really foreign for someone who's been really in the environmental justice world to now hear that it's really interconnected with social justice. But it has to do with the fact that we use very different vocabulary for the both of those things. And I think a lot of the obstacles that are actually affecting the reason our communities are so heavily affected by environmental issues is the fact that we are a lot of the times immigrant communities that are learning to navigate an entirely new system. And so I'm mostly thinking about my parents and the fact that they immigrated from Mexico and they had to learn a whole new language, a whole new system of governance. And then on top of that, they were learning how to advocate for themselves. And I think that's a big obstacle when it comes to getting involvement, but also when we try to recognize the fact that the obstacles preventing our communities from engaging are sometimes more everyday than we would expect. Like sometimes it's not just the lack of knowledge. Sometimes it's literally like, I have to work. That is my priority. And I can't make it to a certain demonstration because my priorities are to go to my job and keep food on the table. And so I think we have to kind of expand the possibilities and not be so rigid in our definition of these things because of environmental justice and social justice, because people want to engage. La Comunidad Latina has an amazing perspective and so much to give to environmental movements. We just have to make sure that we're acknowledging the struggles that they're facing every day.
Yeah, that's true. But Dominica, what's your input on this?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Lisa. You know, the systemic pressures put upon our communities, they're hard, and you know, not only systemic issues, but also, as Lisa was saying, you know, we potentially could be in a state of learning an entirely new culture and system, and so to have these pressures upon us of you know accessing jobs and housing and healthcare and appropriate information in appropriate languages, access to services, help accessing these services, um, you know, coupled with environmental justice issues such as the fair distribution the ability to be at the table, to have the power to help to make these decisions. I wholeheartedly agree, Lisa. We need to be better about breaking down these rigid kind of like concepts of what social justice and environmental justice may look like, to really ensure that we're creating an inclusive system, an inclusive space for people to feel comfortable. And I'll come back to this later, but again, that dialogue, we are very social people, and that dialogue is so important, but I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, no, I definitely really, really agree with Lisa and Dominica, what they were saying of like, there are these barriers, and like environmental justice is like the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to development of implementation and enforcement of environmental laws. But even like those same systems have like these barriers that make it really hard for people to participate in. That's language barriers, or like, even I think one of the things too is like feeling like there's this like feeling of feeling uncomfortable in those spaces as well, of like, my story, it's like it's not important, but it really is. And so like being immigrants, we I think, like, for speaking for like myself and my family, it like, you feel like your voice doesn't matter, or that like it's not important because like you there's this whole system, this country, that's telling you that you don't. And so to be all of a sudden thrust into like, but your voice and your perspective is important, is like a shift for us to get used to, and can be really intimidating, because we see people who are in these spaces who've participated for a really long time, and then we're in it. And so it can, like, at least just for myself, it can be really intimidating. But just being able to empower our community and to really let them know that it is important, and that they share when they share their perspective, that they're being listened to. Because I think for a really long time, we haven't been listened to. And so it can be very discouraging when you feel like you're not being listened to. And so I think there's like this whole shift in perspective. I think that's happening for our Latino community that needs to happen for us to realize that we to feel empowered to share our perspective, and that we belong in these spaces.
Yeah, diversity, equality, and inclusion. I think that's really important on these times, especially because it's not that we don't care, it's we don't know how, or we don't have the opportunity, or we haven't been invited to participate in these spaces. And we need to encourage organizations, leadership which in their majority is white, to open their eyes and look at this community that is growing up and is growing strong and is going to be a great partner to work with. And we don't need people to come to protect us as a community. We need people who see us as members of the community, look eye to eye, and invite us to participate and advocate together to protect our natural resources. And your voices has been really powerful this evening. Thank you for those perspectives. They are really important, and I think this is the perfect space for us to communicate with the rest of the community, to see our perspectives, and to see that we are not here to wait for help. We are here to stand up with the rest of the community and advocate for our communities at the same time. So and I know it's really hard to engage the community, and but also have to acknowledge the time we're getting short. We want to have some time for questions and answers, and I want to ask you guys, what happened, how you feel entering to work in these places where the majority of the leadership or workers, co-workers are white, and we are the first Latinos, Latinas, Latinx participating in this. What was your experience? How you see that, Anna?
Yeah, yeah, definitely very intimidating, especially when I joined Beyond Toxics. I was also new to the state. I had just moved here and trying to build community and get to know the area that I was in. So it was definitely very intimidating. And it's like I had just moved to the state. I had just graduated college. And this was like my first job too. So all of this was just very intimidating for me to like be thrust into this position of leadership. But then throughout the years, it's also realizing like, yeah, I do have a right to be in the space. And the perspective that I do bring is valid and it is real. So that's definitely a mind shift that's changed for me, but it was very intimidating, like being in a space that was like, oh my God, all of these people have been here for a really long time and know so much. And still along the way, just advocating for myself and to be listened and heard. And I think that's the best thing we can offer to people, is to really just listen and where people are coming from.
Thank you, Dominica. What was your experience?
Thank you, Ubaldo. I had the benefit of really starting my career in the nonprofit sector in a Latino-led organization, working to diversify higher education. And so that opportunity, and I was there for about 8 years. And so that opportunity really helped me to like sharpen my skills. And it wasn't really until I moved from that organization trying to pursue my personal passion and career in agriculture and food systems justice and environmental justice that I then kind of, veered into a realm where I felt, I had like the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome is, I don't belong here because nobody else looks like me. And who did I fool to get here, right? Like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough, and it happens because when you look around, you're like, well, oh, I'm the only one that looks like me here. And so, really, that has been a struggle to overcome, and I know that I'm smart and I know that I bring skills. And so as, the world wakes up, right, with all of this a second like civil rights movement, right, it feels good to have people say, oh, hey, you would be a good leader, right? Like I had somebody tell me that for the first time ever, right? Because that's not really like the position that, we're typically, thrusted into or anything, and so just having that opportunity and growing my own personal career, and I think just taking risks, and being kind of forward, you just kind of have to do it. And I think that, I come from a background where my parents are very forward. And so I'm just thankful for that. I know that sometimes like it's, being timid is certainly an obstacle. And I just want to just tell the world that, you are important and you matter and you belong. And, if you have something to say it.
Nice. Lisa, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I wasn't expecting to go into advocacy or a social justice world. So I was used to being the only Latina in the room in research. I was lucky enough to meet 2 Latina researchers throughout my college career, but that was like 4 years. And I met 2 that were running their own labs. And so I knew that I was always going to be a minority in the room. And I kind of prepared myself for that. But then I shifted into a whole new field of work. And that's when the imposter syndrome does hit, because I had completely prepared myself for that in science, but I didn't prepare myself for starting a whole new career and also feeling like a minority. I mean, I'm lucky because I also work with you, Ubaldo. So it's nice to have someone that has your back. And there's a daily reminder that environmental justice is dynamic and it requires many perspectives to clearly identify the depth of the issue. and all the possible solutions. So you just kind of have to remind yourself daily that you deserve to be in the room, and you're making the solution better.
And that's really important that we are working and trying to fit in these spaces and kind of create our own space and start building it. But at the same time, we're working into connecting with community and motivate the community to take action. And Anna, what's your experience? How you see this work that you do to motivate people to take action, that to see the Latino community uh, going and vote, sign a petition? How you see that happen?
I think it definitely starts with building those relationships. Like I've definitely seen um, if I like talking to somebody at least for Epion Toxics with our West Eugene community group, there was somebody there's a community member. She spoke primarily Spanish. She was Latinx, and so I just kind of kept inviting her and talking to her and calling her. And she was engaged, and every time she would go, she went with us to like the Capitol for like one of the Club Pyre Frost rallies in 2019. And afterwards she's like, oh my gosh, she's like, thank you for inviting me. And it's like building that connection so that somebody else feels safe to also engage, and building that relationship that they're not going to be there by themselves, because it's always like helpful to have like somebody, at least I feel like in the Latino community, it's like, oh, yo lo conozco, que yo voy. And so it feels like si conoces a alguien que está allí, you're more likely to engage, and that you've built this relationship and this connection with. So I think that's really important in engaging our Latino community, is like just by showing up, building that relationship, and that you're going to be there.
So Dominica, for you to engage the Latino community to participate on the side of the work you do, like changing the use of pesticides and do the switch from using the pesticide that we usually go to the store and get it, and to look for a different label. How do you experience engaging community in that side?
Yeah, it's similar. It's very similar to what Anna just mentioned, is that dialogue. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, dialogue is so important. And I think that the dialogue is what leads again to those relationships and that trust, because really there has to be trust. And again, I go back to the fact that, we are very social people. We are very cultural people. We love our, and have our family and our friends and our primos y primas y tíos y tía, and we have our people. Right. And so we really look to our people for information and for cleaning products and all sorts of things, and so for me, that's really, where it begins, is like that dialogue with our people, with our folks, with the people that we trust. And then, that really just trickles out and will expand this network. And so I think beyond that is understanding that, pesticide issues may not be at the top of somebody's list of importance. I mean, especially when it comes to, like, as Lisa was talking about, right? I need to go to work. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to put food on my table. I need childcare for my kids. I need, a lot of things sometimes come up before people think about, pesticide harms. And I think that, at NCAP, we acknowledge that. And as we do our work, we really want to be sure that we are working at systems level change to ensure that the policies that Ana Molina's organization is putting out there are passing, and that the advocacy that other organizations are doing, such as PECUN, right? Like overtime, sick pay, all these things that they're passing, because we need to be supporting our people on many levels, and with that, becomes this value for our health and the ability for us to think about opportunities beyond, right, the immediate need. And so, and then, and that's where the pesticides come in. It's like, okay, I have what and now I can think about really, how maybe something that I'm using is not only affecting my health, but the health of the environment and the people around me.
Thank you. Well, our next question is for Lisa. When I ask her about her perspective, especially working for Comunidades, an organization that is advocating to do both things, right? Environmental and social justice. But before I pass the microphone to Lisa, I want you to start writing you questions. You have questions. We can answer some of those in the next. We're gonna have 10 minutes to do that, and I encourage you to start writing your questions. Share what you want to know about the work we do, who we are, our organizations. You can start participating, and Lisa, well, this is your turn. How you see your work advocating for the community and social justice and environmental justice?
Yeah, it feels like it's two separate things, but they're really one. At least from our organizational perspective, they're one and the same. And environmental justice and social justice are one and the same. And the way that we're going about it is just coming through in a multiple ways, right? Engaging people in multiple ways to build that trust, but also get their interest in whatever way they receive information, because not everyone receives information in the same way or gets interested in a subject in the same way. So, we also want to acknowledge that our community learns in a different variety of ways. And so we try and produce things that are going to be interesting for those that want to learn through a podcast. We have Voces del Noroeste, where our volunteers go and discuss environmental and social issues. And there's also other ways like producing comic strips, which are so big in Mexico, and really getting younger kids to engage in social environmental justice. But we're a volunteer-led organization, so a lot of our ideas come from our volunteers and what they want to see in their community. And we're trying to ensure that they are the leaders. And through that, we've built a lot of great, strong relationships. And ultimately, I agree with Ana and Dominica. It's all about the relationships that you build and the trust that you are able to get from people, because then they know that they have someone that they can rely on when it gets really tough, because there are tough times in these campaigns and in these changes.
Yeah, and it's really what we show is different perspectives. One more time, this is a community with different backgrounds, different approach of life, different approach of work, and we have a different ways to communicate, to participate, and we are now learning this new society, and we want to be part of it, but we need to be included on these spaces. And I think we have the right. We need to have this space. Our community is growing, and we need to use these spaces. And I invite members of the Latino community, Latino community, to participate, to approach these organizations and look for spaces, because we deserve these spaces. We need to be part of this conversation, because our communities are one of the ones that have been more affected by environmental crisis. So we need this space to advocate and protect our families, not just our community. Think about your family. Probably your dad, your brother, your sisters work in packing houses, farms, exposed to pesticides, and that's what we need to do to start moving to these spaces and advocate. We are open for questions, and we will happy to share some our answers. But if there is no questions, we can keep talking. There's a lot of topics, and our conversation can be going and going and going for hours. This is just the beginning. Just I think as a part of the Latino community, we have a lot of issues, and we can keep talking about it. Then, so one of the things I would like to know from your perspective, one of hold on, there is a question on Facebook. So let me see. So from Facebook, what are the alternatives to pesticides at home? I think this is for Dominica.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. And, it really depends on the pest. And so, there are certain products, like home products that you can use that are useful for like a variety of different items. Like, for example, vinegar is like a really strong and least toxic, less toxic alternative. But it really does depend on what pest you're experiencing at home. And so what I would suggest is if you visit our website, pesticide.org, we have a resources page, and you can basically look up any of the pest name. You can also look up a chemical name. Like, for example, if you have a chemical, you can say, okay, well, what can I use instead? And so, it really does depend. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of the products that come out that you might be able to buy at Home Depot are broad spectrum, which means it's pretty toxic and it kills everything, And so I think that that's one thing that we're trying to avoid here, right? Is we don't necessarily need a broad spectrum pesticide that has an extremely toxic chemical in it. Instead, let's pinpoint what is our pest problem, whether it be a bug or a weed or some kind of fungus or mushroom, to then be able to identify what least toxic alternatives are available. And so I wish I could be more specific, but I'll put my email in the chat here. So if you do have a specific pest problem, feel free to contact me and I'd love to help you find a solution.
So we have another question from our panelist, Courtney. What's your vision for how Oregon moves forward in the next few years? How we see this Oregon moving forward in the next few years on these pesticides issues? Anna?
Pesticides issues. I think my vision in general for an environmental justice movement, especially here in Oregon, is that it's definitely more diverse and that we see it be led by communities of color that are Black, Indigenous, Latinx, communities of color that are really like bringing forward, because we know these solutions of like how to address the things that are happening in our communities and what we want, and that we're really being listened to, that we reduce our pollution, that our communities have access to healthy, clean air and water and soil so that we can be resilient for changes that are happening, especially in the face of climate change, because we know that our communities are the Latinx, Black, Indigenous communities of color are the ones that are most impacted by climate change, and that we also need our communities to be prepared for emergencies that are coming as well. So definitely, I think my vision is that we are transitioning off of like fossil fuels, and that our communities are thriving, and that our environmental justice movement is led by us.
So we have another question from Juan, some of the participants watching the webinar or the conversation. How the voices of immigrants can be heard without the barrier or the dominant group filtering it, and how to eliminate the culture of the white savior. Anyone? Somebody wants to answer that, Lisa?
I can lean into this question. Yeah, so I think this is where having Latino-led, BIPOC-led organizations is really valuable, because we have these spaces to develop our voices and feel empowered, because ultimately we are going to be facing those barriers of, we have a very white culture that oftentimes tries to filter our thoughts into a more palatable perspective. And being able to have those organizations that are really BIPOC led, continually being there to remind them that our perspectives are ours and they don't need to be filtered. So for anyone who really wants to help support BIPOC communities, I would really encourage you to find your local organizations that you can support, and making sure that we have those spaces to develop our voices and really work together, and face these barriers together.
Yeah, I think one of the things is we don't want to get our point of view filtered by the white perspective, right? We want to make sure that the people that is advocating and voicing the concerns of the Latino community or immigrant community, they are really true advocates. Also, because not all Latinos are pro-Latinos. So this is one of the things that we also have to understand, that we need to pick the right persons to lead these organizations, people that really care about the issues of the Latino community. One of the things that I also like to uh, uh, mention is that white culture is not just white for a white person. It's a culture. It's an imposition to people of color that sometimes they want to see themselves as a white person and they act like one of them. So one of the things is it's important for us and for organizations that they want to hire people, Latinos, that will help them to connect with the Latino community, is that they really do a proper research and hire somebody that really cares about the Latino community. And a lot of times it takes somebody who will disagree with you a lot, because we have a different perspective. We have a different approach to how to erase these problems, you know. And that's what people needs to do. Needs to be brave to understand that, you know, and open these spaces so people can come to these organizations and freely express themselves and advocate for the community. And so we have 1 minute left, and I think our time is getting really close to the end. But I want to thank you to everybody who participate. Thank you to our panelists, Anna, Dominica, Lisa, and for everybody who's been here with us tonight and listen to the perspective of La Comunidad Latina. And I really appreciate your time, and uh, and I hope that you have opportunity to visit our websites or the website of the organizations that we work and participate with us. And like Lisa said, if you want to help Latinos get close to our organizations and collaborate and participate and help us be part of the change.